So welcome, and we're just simply going to continue with this letter of Venerable Bruno to Gabriella. And last time we saw him start his letter by setting out for her a very concrete and, as people say, doable program of spiritual life, which I'm really happy to share with you. And I'd invite you to ask yourself, you even pause the recording here for a while, and look at each of the four of these and just ask yourself what the Lord might be saying to you, and you get closer to the Eucharist. Do you have these 10, 15 minutes of prayer a day? And if you don't, can you find them in creative ways in the course of your day? Do you take in new spiritual nourishment each day? And if not, can you find a way to get at least a little bit every day? And then do you ever reflect on or review your spiritual life together with the Lord? And is there a way to do that? And what might happen when you do? You'll notice that everything about his spiritual direction as he sets out a life of prayer for her is very simple, very solid, very well-centered, right at the well springs, at the heart of the Church's sources of strength, the Eucharist, the source and summit, and then these classic exercises of prayer that are so essential. It is doable for you, doable for all of us. And so Venerable Bruno would say, begin and begin immediately. Don't wait. All right, what about the rest of the day outside the formal times of prayer? And so he continues as he speaks to her. Do not forget to raise your heart frequently, but gently and with peace to God, so that as the day is unfolding, not just from time to time, you're lifting your heart just to be aware of the Lord, to be with the Lord. You know that feeling that we have sometimes when we do have those formal times of prayer, and then hours go by in the activity of the day, and we realize with a little bit of wishing things were otherwise, that I haven't even thought about you, Lord, for several hours, and wishing for a way to be more in communion with the Lord throughout the busy hours of the day, getting meals and traveling and work and all the things we do. And so this is Venerable Bruno's counsel to her. Just don't forget this. Let this be part of your day frequently. Doesn't add any time to your day. You walk out the door of your house to your car or down the street to get the subway, and you just lift your heart to the Lord as you're doing this. Or you put down the phone and you're ready to start the next activity, and you just lift your heart briefly to the Lord. You can fill the day with moments like this, and it makes such a difference. This is doable as well. And you see, none of this is calling for a lot of time, which is usually the reason why we think that we can't pray more in the course of the day. It isn't really a matter of time. It's a matter of choosing solid practices, a sustainable amount of time, and then being faithful to them. A priest was telling me of a conversation he had with a monk who was appointed abbot of a monastery. And when he arrived at the monastery, he gathered the monks and he said to them, I'd like to ask all of you 7 times a day for 1 minute to stop, and this is outside the formal times of prayer, just in the course of the day, for 1 minute to stop and just lift your heart in remembrance and praise and adoration of God. And the abbot said to this priest, within a year they were all contemplatives. Do not forget to raise your heart frequently to God throughout the day. But now notice what else he says to this busy woman who can also tend to be impatient and sharp and is very much capable and a leader. Do not forget to raise your heart frequently to God, but gently and with peace. But gently and with peace. Gently and with peace. This is another key element in the entire spiritual direction of Venerable Bruno. Just hear those 2 words, gently and with peace, which is to say, if you are considering or maybe doing or considering some other step in your spiritual life, and you have the sense that I can do it if I squeeze out that last bit of already exhausted energy, or I can take on that or add this or get up an hour earlier and pray, and all. If I kind of white-knuckling and against all the limitations of my humanity, but pushing and squeezing, and know that God's not asking that of you. Do all of this, but do it gently and with peace. Think of the fruits of the Spirit in Galatians 5. You don't find white-knuckling and exhausted straining, squeezing out the last bit of exhausted energy. And this is always present throughout Venerable Bruno. He's not lowering the bar. When I was writing the book, I asked several people to read the chapters as I was writing them, just to get their input. And this was a layman, husband and father of a beautiful family. And his comment was, it's a very encouraging spirituality, but he doesn't lower the bar. And you can see he's calling her to be what Pope Francis speaks of as middle-class holiness. He's calling her to be a saint in her vocation, as we're all called to be that. But it's without strain. It's without anxiety. It's without, I've got to squeeze that last little. No. Do all of this, but do it gently and with peace. This is a disciple of the Jesus who says, learn from me because I am gentle and lowly of heart. I think this is one of the reasons, many reasons, why so many people came to Venerable Bruno for spiritual direction. In fact, we have witnesses who say that during that turmoil of the French occupation and the persecution of the church, all of those in this city of Turin, which was the capital of this little nation, who remained faithful, visibly faithful to the church throughout those years, all had one thing in common. They were spiritually directed by Venerable Bruno. You see this. You can see why. I think we've already said enough, so you can see why people willingly came to him for direction or conversation or confession, as many people did. So do not forget to raise your heart frequently, but gently and with peace to God, and to make acts of mortification. All right, this is another classic element of the spiritual life. And as he'll say to her, make acts of mortification, so don't forget to do this. But he knows to whom he's speaking here, and so he says, especially interior ones. Now, this is a classic distinction if you look at St. Francis de Sales, Alphonsus, and so forth, a number of the saints, the distinction between interior and exterior mortification. When we think of mortification, we think of self-denial in terms of exterior mortification, so things with diet or sleep or various things that we give up and so forth. But there is also, and for this woman, whom he knows so well, with the pressures on her day and administration, all that she's dealing with, raising her young children, you need mortification, because mortification helps us. It frees us up to move toward God. One of the best summaries I've ever heard of St. John of the Cross is he's all about making space for God. And that's what mortification does. It creates a space that is not so filled with other things that it can't receive God. It's empty enough so that it can receive the thing the heart most needs and wants and loves. For her, the real call to mortification is going to be interior mortification. It's going to be a mortification of the heart, which doesn't mean it's going to be easy, but it's what's going to be most helpful for her. And he specifies what he means by this. So do not forget to make acts of mortification, especially interior ones, for you, this capable leader, somewhat sharp and impatient woman, or who can tend to be this way. For you, this means the effort to live each moment with a gentle and joyful spirit. Now, obviously, if this woman maintained this relationship of spiritual direction with Venerable Bruno, it's because she really wanted to live the things that he was counseling her to do. And so I think we can easily imagine that after receiving these letters, she would renew her effort, to be gentle and joyful as she interacts with her children and the household and the things of every day. And my guess would be that the family would feel the difference after she received one of these letters, or they're probably very occasional encounters, maybe once a year, if that. I remember a priest telling me he lived in a community, and his community noticed that whenever he came back from spiritual direction, he always seemed to have a new peace, just a new warmth about him. And so he said that when he'd start to get irritated and bothered and so on, somebody would say to him, isn't it time for you to go to spiritual direction? You know? And I suspect that the family must have felt the same when she would have her occasional encounters and receive these letters, and would renew in the family that effort to be, as he says, gentle and joyful. That kind of interior mortification, which is something I think that all of us can think about. There probably are ways for all of us in which we can exercise this kind of restraint, maybe just not allowing ourselves to say the angry words so easily, or the impulsive response that can make things difficult for people, or these sort of unchecked things that are driven less by conscious choices, but more just by emotions in a way that may not be helpful and so on. That kind of interior mortification can be a great blessing, so that we too live with a gentle and joyful spirit. People will love you. There's so little of this in the world today. Pope Francis is always speaking about tenderness and how little tenderness there is in the world and how much we need it. Practice that kind of interior mortification. Ask God for the grace to be gentle and joyful as you interact with others, and wonderful things will happen. Now, the next thing that he says with probably the strongest language that he can, for the love of God, so that's the most powerful motive that he knows. And then secondly, I beg of you. So what follows is something that's coming deep from his heart, that he's urging on her with the strongest language that he has at his disposal. For the love of God, I beg of you to wage continual warfare against negative moods. Again, this woman who can be sharp and discouraged and struggling and impatient and so on. Wage continual warfare against negative moods. That would be a blessed warfare or battle for any of us to wage. All right, what happens? I tried, but I fell into impatience. And then again, and I was sharp with this child or with that person. I beg of you to wage continual warfare against negative moods and never fail to begin again. This is so central to his direction that actually with the editor we chose this as the title of the biography I did of Venerable Bruno, Begin Again. Never fail to begin again. This is, oftentimes he'll quote the Latin of this Nunc Caepii, which is from the Latin Vulgate translation of Psalm 77 in the Vulgate Bible, which is what they used at the time. And if you look at Psalm 77, which today is translated from the Hebrew, you won't find exactly this phrase. Now I begin would be the translation of this. You won't find it exactly like that in our translations today. But if you look at the psalm, you'll see the movement. It's a descending movement of discouragement and things going badly and increasing burden, and you feel as though the psalm is just going to end like this. And then suddenly out of nowhere there is this upsurge of new energy and hope. And that's what this Nunc Caepii is in the Latin translation. Then I said, now, out of all of this darkness, then I said, now I begin. And you have this new wave of energy and growth toward the Lord. So this is what he is urging to Gabriella, and I would say easily to any one of us. Do you have your program of prayer? Are you trying to live it? Are you trying to live with a gentle and joyful spirit, but you fail? Of course you do. As the years have gone by, I have come to love more and more Proverbs 24:7, if I remember correctly. The just man falls 7 times a day. He does, she does, we all do. And it's comforting to see that, said that serenely in the scripture. Our failures are never the problem. The problem is the failure to begin again, to allow ourselves to remain stuck in the discouragement and the sense of helplessness. That's the real issue. And so he says to her, if you fail, then begin again. And what's the adverb going to be? Immediately. I was at a ceremony in a parish a few months ago, and one of the concelebrants was a priest whom I'd known I'd seen a few times before. And so we just said hello before the Mass began, and he asked what I was writing. He knew that I was doing this. And so I mentioned I was doing this little book on Venerable Bruno, and he lit up, and he said, "Don't chapey." I said, how did you know about that? Well, he said, I made a retreat at the retreat house run by my community near Boston. And he said, everywhere on the walls that they have sayings of Venerable Bruno posted, and framed and posted all over the retreat house. He said, I kept seeing that phrase. It was the main thing he took from his retreat. Never to let yourself sit in failure, but to begin again. And as I've been sharing this teaching with people, I can't tell you how much I find this means to people. I'll have people who will tell me things like this. Even aware, okay, you failed, but don't stay in the failure. Begin again. I'll repeat again. Failure, even sin, is not the problem. The only problem is allowing ourselves to be discouraged and feeling like we're helpless and we can't move beyond that. That's why for Venerable Bruno, it's very clear that the principal obstacle in the spiritual life is discouragement. And that's why he has so much to say about this. If we want to use the Ignatian term, spiritual desolation, when we just get disheartened and discouraged in our relationship with God, our life of prayer, living our vocations. A woman said in one of the sharings that, because Venerable Bruno will say, don't begin again just here every day, begin every hour of every day. She said, I always thought that if let's say my prayer just didn't go well today, I had to kind of say to the Lord, I'm sorry, Lord, tomorrow I'll start again. It was wonderful to realize I don't have to wait till tomorrow. I can start right now. I can begin again immediately. I've really come to love these simple words, begin again, no chafing, because, and I'll say this about as strongly as I can say it because it's so important. What it tells us is that there is nowhere we can ever have been in our spiritual lives, nothing we can ever have done in our spiritual lives that can ever stop us right now from turning to God if we needed, asking for a forgiveness which He is eager to give. That's the whole point of Luke 15, the parables of forgiveness, the joy. Look at Luke 15, the lost sheep, the lost coin, and the prodigal son. It's the chapter where the word joy and rejoice is most used. Asking forgiveness if we need it, and then beginning again. Nothing can ever stop us from doing that. It's come to mean a lot for me in my own life too, when I see myself fail in one thing or another. Don't ever, ever allow yourself to remain locked in discouragement in your spiritual life. We are never called upon to do that. There is always a way forward, and it's right here. And it's at your fingertips every moment of every day. Right now, if you need it, as you're hearing this. Just turn to God, ask for forgiveness if you need it, and He loves to give, gives immediately. And then begin again. You can almost predict, you could almost write the next sentence in this letter. Do not wait. This is Venerable Bruno. Begin immediately now. Do not wait. Do not wait until you have devotion. Just look how often he uses this verb begin. Do not wait until you have devotion to begin these things. Begin even without devotion, since that will come with time, and this is precisely the means to attain it. All right? This is almost, sometimes it seems to me that this letter is like a Thomistic question in the Summa, objection and answer. Very gently, he's answering all kinds of implicit objections. So, do not wait until you have devotion to begin this program, Eucharist, meditation, and so on. Implicitly, what he's addressing is this. Venerable Bruno, and I say this to anyone listening now, Venerable Bruno, all of that's very beautiful. It's doable. It's a lovely program of spiritual life. It makes sense. It's actually uplifting to hear all of that. But I'm not a saint. My prayer is so poor. I forget about God. I just kind of miss opportunities. I'm self-indulgent, all the things that we said before. I'm not there. Maybe this other man or woman that I know is, who has such a wonderful spiritual life and whom I admire, but I'm not that kind of person. Right, that's what he means by devotion. He's using devotion here in the sense that Francis de Sales uses it in the introduction to the devout life. That is basically holiness is what he's speaking about. when I try to pray, so here's the objection, I don't have that kind of warmth. I don't feel God's closeness. I struggle even to stay the whole time, and maybe I don't even stay the whole time more often than I would wish. I'm just not on that level in the spiritual life. And so what he says is, don't wait until you are at that level to begin this program. Because, as he'll say, devotion must be the fruit and not the cause of this program of spiritual life. Let's look at that as he says it here. Begin even without devotion. So begin today. Begin right where you are, right now, spiritually. Begin even without devotion, since that will come with time. And this is precisely the means to attain it. Do you see holiness in another person and kind of wish you had it, but know with a certain heaviness that you don't? Begin. Put these things into practice, and you will find that all of that will be coming as you do this. Devotion must be the fruit and not the cause. It's the principle behind St. Pius X extending daily communion and the younger age of receiving communion. The Eucharist is not a reward, it's a medicine. So, do you want to grow in a sense of God's, of more lively faith and deeper prayer and closer adherence to Jesus? All of that will come if you adopt this program. Begin immediately with what's doable, and you will find that that kind of devotion will come in your life. And that's a promise. Look, these are clear words of Jesus. Ask and you'll receive. Seek and you'll find. Whatever you ask in my name, I'll do it. And how much more when it's people who are, it's not the lost sheep trying to get away, and God won't let them go, but people who are very much seeking the Lord and wanting to. Now let's just stop and dream for a minute. What if you actually did the things that Venerable Bruno is advising this woman who is as busy as you are to live the spiritual life this way? What would happen? Pause the video if you want. Think about it. Pray about it. What is the Lord saying to you? Is he calling you to make some decisions? If you make them, I can tell you this, not only will you never regret them, you'll be grateful forever to the Lord. Devotion must be the fruit and not the cause of the practices I have recommended. For the rest, you know that true devotion consists in readiness to be faithful to the Lord and not in sentiment. I hope that soon you will send me consoling news in this regard. If you can tell me that you're living these things, that will bring consolation to my heart. So, I'm going to sum this up now and put together what he has said to us thus far. And here's the program. You can filter it through the nuances of your own life. Choose solid spiritual practices, Eucharist, meditations, all the different things that we've seen. We have such a rich Catholic spiritual tradition. There are many ways of praying. Get to know them enough so that you know the ones that you are most at home with. Choose them. So that you're beginning on solid ground. Your foundation is solid. Choose a sustainable amount of time for them. For this busy mother of 4 children, that's 15 daily Mass if she can get there. 15 minutes of meditation, a single page to examine while she's working. For each of us, that may be a little bit different. So one of us says, but I'm not sure how much time to choose. Then I would say this as a principle. If you're not sure, choose less rather than more. Much better to choose less in a way that you know you can sustain and to which you can always add more if you feel the call from the Lord, than to aim too high and find out that you can't sustain it. So if you're not sure you can do 20 minutes of meditation a day, do 10. Take one small step that's not a small step, take one step with the Spirit, and the Spirit will show you the next and the next in the Spirit's own time. Choose a sustainable amount of time for these various spiritual practices. Then be faithful. He will speak of a holy tenacity. We've seen him speak of being consistently faithful. And you can be faithful because it's solid and it's sustainable. All right, what happens if it all falls apart? I did it for a week or 10 days and then everything got into a kind of hurricane of activity and it all fell apart. And you already know how he's going to answer. If you fail, begin again. And when? Immediately. Do not wait. And do it all gently and with peace. And that's the program. That's the invitation. Quite a lot for one letter, isn't it? And it's really all there. Of course, much of this would have been said in, over the years of their spiritual direction. And then he moves toward the conclusion of the letter. I ask you to give my greetings to Father Cesare, since I'm being recorded here. Since I started public speaking, this is water with a little bit of honey in it, I have become very grateful for what St. Francis of Assisi calls our sister water, Soracqua, which is very humble, he says, and chaste and useful and precious. It's one of the most beautiful descriptions, I think the most beautiful description of water in all of literature. It's a wonderful gift from the Lord. Okay, I ask you to give my greetings to Father Cesare. We don't know who this priest was, but Venerable Bruno spiritually guided and formed many priests. This would have been one of them. And to tell him that I would be happy to see him here, and that I always hope to be able one day to visit with him there. So you get a sense from these letters that, as I say, his visits actually to meet with her in person were probably not too frequent. For the present, tell Father Ferrero, so this is the priest who has moved into the area, that even though I have not yet had the joy of meeting him, I ask him to give you no rest in what? In committing yourself to practicing all that I have just recommended to you, and to call you strictly to account. So there's the fidelity. And I will be grateful to him for this. I bless you together with all your family. I recommend myself to your prayers, and I am, with the highest esteem and respect, your servant and Father in Jesus Christ, Father Lanteri. We'll take a second letter now. This next letter is 14 months later, and the circumstances are different. This time he's not replying to a letter from her. Her son Clemente, who is 16 years old at this time, is in Turin studying, and Venerable Bruno knows that he's going back to visit the family, and so he takes the opportunity quickly to jot down a note to his mother, Gabriella. So that's the background to this letter. I would like to use this opportunity of the departure from Turin of Monsieur. These letters are all in French. That was the what English is today as the international language. French was then, and of course they lived right next to French. Most of the educated people all spoke French. Of Monsieur your son for some profit, but I do not know of what I should speak, because he hasn't had a letter from her. Should I praise you for your fidelity to God? Ought I chide you? I do not know at all. So I will take a sure course. Now we've already seen enough of Venerable Bruno so that we can already predict, if you don't look ahead in the letter, we can probably already predict some of the things he's going to say. They're just going to be the things that he knows are always going to be valuable in any circumstances. So I will take a sure course, and that is to counsel you to do what? To begin each day. That's the first thing he does, to begin each day. And I'll share that counsel with all of us listening, to begin each day, today. Abandoning the past to the Lord's mercy and the future to his divine providence. So we'll pick this up in our next session.